Welcome to the Law School Insider, where we have conversations with students, lawyers, and employers.
Succeeding in law school is something that you must prepare for, not only before you begin, but throughout your law school journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and I will draw from my over 20 years of experience in the college admission field, as well as bring forth the experiences of others as we delve deeper into the issues. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Law School Insider. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and I'm so excited to have you back again this week. This week, I am proud to introduce you to Mike Eschelbach, and Mike is the director of the Bureau of Tax Policy with the state of Michigan. And I've known Mike for some time, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk to him, have him bring some of his experiences to all of you, and also for him to share some of the successes that he has found along the way, as well as some hints that he might have for all of you as well. So, Mike, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Well, thanks for the nice welcome. I'm pleased to be here.
So, Mike, this show is all about law school success. So I always start off by talking about the journey. So I'm going to have you go back in time, rewind the wheel a little bit, and let's talk about that journey for yourself. What was it about the law that drew you in from the get-go, and what sustains you today?
Well, I'm almost ashamed to say at the very beginning, when I was an undergrad, one of the things that drew me was the prospect of a higher income level. I had originally been studying finance, and at least at that point in time, which was quite a while ago, the compensation levels in the banking business or in other financing areas was not that great. So I was looking around for something else that would be interesting for me to do that paid better. And one thing that struck me was the law. And actually, when I finally got into it more, I realized that there was a lot more to it than just potential income, that there are so many different areas of law that provided a vast array of potential careers. It was a good choice for me.
Now, I mentioned at the very beginning that you are working in a pretty specific area for the state of Michigan. You're working in tax policy, and not everyone would say that tax was their favorite course in law school. But I'm going to say and ask you this question is, what was it in law school or beyond that led you down the path to moving into not only public work, but also working in this area, in the tax realm?
In law school, I took a variety of tax courses, and while I found them interesting, they weren't all-consuming by any means. When I graduated from law school, I went to work for a firm, and for about 25 years, I practiced primarily in the area of education law. And I specialized, so to speak, in a couple of distinct areas that related to our school district clients. I did a lot of work in special education law as well as construction law. And occasionally for school district clients in Michigan, before 1994 and the passage of what's called Proposal A, the school financing system was much different than it is today. And there were then what were called in-formula and out-of-formula school districts. And if you were an out-of-formula school district, you got no state aid whatsoever, and all of your revenue came from your property tax receipt. And for an out-of-formula district that had a large taxpayer that was, for example, protesting or challenging its property tax assessment, there was a lot of revenue on the line. And so occasionally I would have out-of-formula school district clients who brought me in to defend a property tax assessment because the actual assessing unit, for example, a city or a township municipality assessor, would generally be the party in the case, but the municipality itself typically had much less revenue at stake and wasn't all that interested or enthused about spending what it would take to defend a large property tax case. I had a number of cases that involved property tax. I did have some exposure then while I was in practice to tax from that aspect. And of course, I worked on my own individual taxes, which is always an interesting and challenging event each year. But after about 25 years of that, I left the practice. It was time for me to do something else. And eventually, after a little while, I saw an ad actually for a position in the Michigan Department of Treasury's Tax Policy Division as what's called an administrative law specialist. And it was a particular area that position related to, and that was sales and use tax. And frankly, other than paying sales tax occasionally, when I would buy something, I didn't really have any knowledge of sales or use tax. But it was an interesting job, interesting opportunity, and I thought, well, shoot, how hard can it be to learn? And as I found out, it was probably harder than I thought. And I would say it was probably at least a year of working in the area before I was really comfortable that I was pretty knowledgeable and conversant about Michigan sales and use tax. Since that time, I spent about, maybe 7 or 8 years as an administrative law specialist, and then moved up to become the administrator of the tax policy division and then the director of the tax policy bureau. In the administrative and director positions, I've had a lot of exposure to and involvement in issues relating to lots of other, but all non-property taxes. So they range from the sales and use taxes that I was more comfortable dealing with because I'd had more exposure to them, to things like individual income tax, Michigan business tax, single business tax, corporate income tax, tobacco tax, motor fuel tax. We tax all kinds of things. It's been very interesting, and it's surprising the issues that come up in a tax context that will bring in lots of other aspects of the law that you wouldn't necessarily automatically or off the bat associate with tax.
Appreciate you sharing that. Now, as you think back to your own law school experience, and like I said, I'm going to take you back in time. When you think about that, are there things that you wish that you would have done, would have accomplished, would have worked on in a different way that would have prepared you better for the career that you have found yourself in? And if so, what are they, and how can others find that similar success?
One thing I will say is, as far as, the classes that I took in law school, I don't know that what I took, that I would have taken anything different to better prepare me for what I'm doing. I took a pretty wide variety of courses. Some, of course, were required. Some were elective. But one interesting thing that I think one of my professors back then, and it's been a while, told us in this class was that, law school basically teaches you how to think like a lawyer. You're not going to learn in law school everything that you need to know to be a lawyer. You're going to have to know how to do research. You're going to have to know how to read the law. You're going to have to know how to think. And that's really what's most important. And that was a very good piece of advice. It was very true as far as I can tell. Because even if you take all the tax courses, for example, that are offered in law school, and you get an LLM in tax afterwards even, you are not ever going to learn everything that you would need to know to be a tax lawyer. You just can't. There are too many things. There are too many specific little, not piddly issues necessarily, but very specific provisions. One line in a 90-page tax statute, for example, that's all you need to focus on for a particular case. You're not going to have any law school class that's going to teach you what that one line of statute means. You're going to have to use what you learned in school to figure it out and take a position and be able to defend it. The things that I didn't do that in retrospect would have been good to do, that I wish I had done, is I did not participate much in the extra things that were available, like a moot court competition, for example, or things that would have prepared me for actual courtroom experience. Those are the things that I can think of that, in retrospect, I wish I had done more of. They would have been very helpful. And I think, actually, that my understanding of law school education today, and bear in mind that I was in law school 40 years ago, is, I understand, or believe anyway, tends to be a bit more hands-on, that students get more experience in courtroom activity, which I think is great, because if you've had none like I'd had, the first time you appear in a courtroom is when you're representing a client, and it could be a scary experience if you've never done it before.
I'm sure it can. Now, I know that, as you said, you've been in your career for quite a few years, and as you have interacted more recently with recent graduates, are you finding that there are traits, skills, or things that young graduates are bringing into the field that are suiting them well, or that they need to work on to be able to find success in that first job and beyond?
Yeah, both. One of the traits that I can think of right off the top of my head that is good to bring in, that we really like to see, is enthusiasm. Interest, that the subject that we're involved with here is something that the student is interested in working with. We have interns from time to time. We have law students that we hire in various positions, and by and large, we've been exceptionally pleased with the quality of the folks that we have seen in those roles. Because of where we're located here in Lansing, we have opportunities for students from both the Cooley Law School and the Michigan State University Law School, and students from both those institutions have taken advantage of our opportunities over the years. And we've seen, because this area is, it's a bit arcane to the point where the students aren't going to be learning in class what they need to apply in order to get the work done that we would provide them, to ask them to do. If they're enthusiastic, if they're willing to look at something new, if they know how to do things, if they know how to do research, if they know how to write, that's great. I really like that, and it shows up. One of the downsides is, and frankly, this is not an issue that we see much in the students that we encounter because we just don't bring them in. We do, screen. We have a process where we determine who we would like to bring in and who we would not. It's surprising to me the number of students, and actually the number of lawyers who apply for positions here who don't write well. You need to be able to write well. You need to write cogently, grammatically correctly, which, some people may think is an anachronism, but I have found in my own personal career that if you can write well, so that if you're writing a brief for a judge who may not have a clue what's the law in the particular case that you're presenting to him or her, you need to write clearly and understandably. It makes it easier for the judge. And making it easier for the judge goes a long way with the judge, in my experience, to the point where sometimes you see the judge sort of lifting paragraphs out of your brief in the written opinion that the court issues. And you know then that you've done a good job. That's one thing that I would say that I find extremely valuable and important is the ability to communicate, both in the written form as well as orally. If you're presenting an oral argument in a court or arguing in front of a jury, you have to be a well-spoken individual. You have to be understood.
I really appreciate that. Now, are there specific things that you would recommend that someone do to become stronger in those areas, especially on the communication end, either written or in spoken communication?
Practice helps. If the school offers a moot court opportunity, for example, or a courtroom practice course, I would certainly recommend those. The more practice you can get, the better you can be at something. Depending on what the skill level is that is needed to be improved, I had some circumstances, for example, in my previous law practice career, I remember at one point the firm that I was with, we hired a very bright attorney who was very well spoken, but had a lot of difficulty writing. And what the firm did for that attorney was, once that person was hired as an associate, the firm paid for a writing class at, I think it was Lansing Community College. Could have been Michigan State, but it doesn't matter where it was. And the new attorney worked hard and improved quite a bit. So, whether you do it on your own or take a course or find some other way, get a mentor that will help you with something, there are always ways to address anything that you have that needs some shoring up.
Really appreciate you being with us today. Are there any final thoughts, any final words of wisdom that you want to share, if you could share with someone that was coming into the field, coming into law school?
Well, one word of wisdom, not necessarily exactly for somebody going into law school, although I think it probably applies there too, but coming out of law school, one of the issues that I've seen in courtrooms and in practice today that's more of an issue than it seems like it used to be is the issue of civility. You don't have to agree with anybody, but we do need to be civil with each other. We're all members of the bar. We should treat each other with respect, even though we may vociferously disagree with each other when it comes to a legal position or a courtroom situation.
Well, Mike, I really want to say thank you again for being with us today, for sharing your journey and sharing your thoughts on what others can do to be able to be more successful. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you and seeing more about your success in the future.
Very good. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, that was another great guest this week on the Law School Insider. If you have an interest in being a guest on the show, drop me an email at lawschoolinsider@cooley.edu. And thank you all for listening today. And remember, you have the ability and right to take control of your law school's success. I hope you'll continue listening, creating a plan for success that will prepare you to achieve the dreams that you have set for yourself. Talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. You're on your way to being a law school insider. Please subscribe to stay connected and come back again next time as we speak to more students, lawyers, and employers.